To discuss unraveling the mysteries of brain inflammation, we have Dr. Rudolph Tanzi, neurology professor at the Harvard Medical School, and Dr. Deepak Chopra, founder of the Chopra Foundation, speaking with Dr. Mehmet Oz, Emmy award-winning host of The Dr. Oz Show and cardiothoracic surgeon.
I'm blessed to introduce two very good friends who happen to be world experts in our topic of discussion, which is the health of the mind. Let's start with Rudy Tanzi. Rudy, you're a warrior against inflammation, one of the root causes of many kinds of disease that afflict the body. All the organs, frankly, are often impacted by these inflammatory conditions, but especially the brain. And I'd love to hear you discuss some of your experimental research around ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, because I think it offers a huge clue to many more ailments.
Yeah, in ALS or Lou Gehrig's disease, like in Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease, there are different ways to trigger inflammation in the brain, but it's inflammation that does most of the killing of nerve cells causing the symptoms. And so recently I helped start a company that developed a novel drug combination that was meant to protect the nerve cells in the brain against the ravages of inflammation. And we tested it in an ALS trial, and we led to significant improvement of symptoms and extended survival of the patients. And so that drug combination is now going up for approval in Europe, Canada, the US. We're waiting to hear. And we're trying it in Alzheimer's, and we're going to try it in every neurodegenerative disease we can, because there's a common thread of neuroinflammation in all those diseases.
What specifically are you doing? I know you're great at making this stuff accessible. That's why I love having you on my show. But I explain to folks what ALS is and why you think you may have a worthwhile experimental treatment.
Well, in ALS, there are specific nerve cells called motor neurons that die because you get these abnormally folded proteins of different types that form in them. And same thing in Alzheimer's, you have abnormal proteins like what are called amyloid and tangles. In Parkinson's, there's Lewy bodies. So as these abnormal proteins misfold and kill X number of nerve cells, the brain's very primitive immune system reacts to that. And the way the brain works is that these little cells called glial cells that are normally housekeeping and cleaning the brain while you sleep, that's why sleep is so important. If they see nerve cells dying, they assume it's an infection, even if it's not an infection. They evolve that way. And they say, wipe out this part of the brain, it's compromised, it's infected. They don't ask questions. They've been evolving this way for tens of thousands of years. And now these little housekeeping cells that normally clean start killing all the nerve cells in the region. They think as a way to protect. That's why inflammation in the brain and body is a double-edged sword, right? It's meant to protect you. But if there's too much of it, you get Alzheimer's. If there's too much in COVID, you get lung problems. So that's basically what goes wrong.
Deepak, I think continue that discussion if you don't mind. You've been a big proponent of the ability of the mind to impact some of these chronic ailments. What percentage of disease-related gene mutations guarantee disease? In other words, how genetic are problems?
So I think Rudy will agree that it's less than 5% of disease-related gene mutations that are fully penetrant or guarantee the disease. The rest are influenced by lifestyle. And even the genes that cause you to be susceptible to, say, Alzheimer's, cancer, whatever, can be influenced by lifestyle. Inflammation, as Rudy just said, is a protective response. When you fall down or have an injury, inflammation protects you from bleeding to death, even in chronic situations. It's inappropriate inflammation, aggressive, associated with the fight-flight response as well, that causes damage. And now we know that low-grade inflammation, depression, and anxiety precede chronic illness by several years. And the pillars of well-being that reduce inflammation are good sleep, stress management, breathing, mind-body coordination, yoga, exercise, appropriate exercise, emotional resilience, and most importantly now food, because we know that what you put into your body influences the microbiome instantly.
So let me flip here a little bit, because since Deepak, you're the expert on the world of the mind. Rudy, let me ask you the question that often is asked of Deepak. You study fighting disease at the molecular level, so you understand exactly what's going down. You began to explain. Do you believe the right mindset your approach to life of a patient, of an individual, could have a beneficial effect, even at that level, at the level of molecules.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, look, stress causes the formation of cortisol, which kills nerve cells. And the cortisol may just kill a small amount of nerve cells. But again, when the brain's immune system, the other cells, the glial cells, see these nerve cells die, they can get upset and they cause inflammation. And now you kill 10 times or 100 times more nerve cells. Anything that kills cells in the body or brain can trigger inflammation, because inflammation is so simple. These old evolutionary cells, when they see cells dying, always assume it's an infection.
Mhm.
And now they didn't get the memo that we live a long time now. And sometimes cells just die because we live so long. They see cells die, they're like, oh, wipe it out, wipe out this part. It must be an infection. So it's meant to protect you, but now it's overkill, like literally overkill. So this evolutionarily programmed system of inflammation meant to protect you goes haywire. So when you're in a proper mindset and you're relaxed, and like Deepak says, you're breathing and you're meditating and you're alleviating stress, there's two things that go on. One is that you're alleviating, you're turning down these toxic chemicals that can kill cells and kill nerve cells. But also there's a whole field now of psychoneuroimmunology. And Deepak and I wrote a whole book about it, The Healing Self, which is how positive attitude, how an attitude of healing and whole body type of feelings can actually trigger health. And we're still trying to understand how that process works at the level of neurons and at the level of genetics.
Deepak, for all the powers of the brain, and we give it lip service a lot of times, but you've been able to tune into these powers quite nice and explain it to many people like me. The human mind's role, the potential power that it has in healing the body is often ignored. Explain to folks a little bit about your philosophy of this overlooked opportunity.
So, Mehmet, as you know, one of the fundamental questions in science is called the hard problem of consciousness. How do we experience thoughts, feelings, emotions, insight, intuition, inspiration, creativity, vision, even reverence for God? How does the brain do that? Is the brain doing the mind, or is the mind doing the brain? And right now, the conversation seems to be neither is doing each other. Consciousness is more fundamental. We experience it subjectively as the mind. We experience it objectively as the body and the brain. The brain is part of the body. So whatever happens in the mind is correlated in the brain. Whatever happens in the brain, correlated in the mind. But you, the real self, what spiritual traditions call the soul, or cognitive scientists call conscious agent, you're in charge, neither the mind nor the brain. You give orders to your brain, like you can order a dish with a waiter. So you just give orders to your brain, and the brain executes everything. So does the mind if you leave it alone. And therefore, you, the real true self, are in charge of both mind and brain, which are correlated activities. And meditation helps you to be clear in your thinking, so you have a clear, quiet, alert mind from where the thought should come.
And what gives you that essence, that soul? Where does that come from in your cosmology? The part of your essence that's able to order the brain, the technology to work.
So right now, cognitive scientists, those who believe in this framework, say that soul or that conscious agent is an aspect of a universal consciousness, which religions might call God. So it doesn't matter what you call it. Religions call God, Ein Sof, Allah, Brahman, whatever. But there's an underlying field of awareness or consciousness that modulates itself and differentiates itself into conscious agents that we call soul. Just like a stem cell modulates itself or differentiates into eyes, nose, organs, etc., hair follicles, brain, everything comes from one pluripotential cell. There's one field of consciousness, which is universal, is differentiating into species-specific modes of knowing that we call souls.
I love that. Species-specific modes of knowing. All right, Rudy, top that.
You are and I am a species-specific mode of knowing that we call Homo sapiens. But an insect with 100 eyes is another mode of knowing. Any sentient being is a mode of knowing. And there are infinite modes of knowing, infinite knowers, and infinite objects known, because the universal consciousness is infinite.
Rudy, that's a heady element to follow, but I want to get back to your ALS drug for a second. I want to understand why you think it shows promise for Alzheimer's, for Parkinson's, for schizophrenia. Alzheimer's and Parkinson's you touched on, but the emotional, or we think emotional ailments of schizophrenia, depression, that's a little bit of a further stretch. And I'm curious how that ties into what Deepak was just speaking about of species-specific modes of knowing.
Yeah, I mean, Deepak.
Well, Rudy and I have these conversations all the time,
Yeah.
by the way.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, I remember the day we came up with this whole idea of species-specific universes. I mean, which universe is real? The one that the bacteria experiences with, in soup, or is it the one that we experience? They're all valid. They're all just species-specific. And in our own universe, we have some issues because our brain, which basically interprets this universe for us, it undergoes degeneration with age. And the degeneration that comes with age can be brought on by many different things. Bangs to the head, it can be genetics, it can be a unhealthy lifestyle. But at the end of the day, you have to trigger inflammation in the brain to get the disease. So we know this because of resilient brains, right? So every once in a while, someone with no cognitive problems will die in their 80s, and the pathologist is doing the postmortem brain dissection, and they see tons of amyloid plaques and tangles that you get in Alzheimer's, and he says, "Wait, this is an Alzheimer's patient," and you say, "No, the person was perfectly fine." And this is rare. These cases of lots of Alzheimer's pathology, plaques and tangles, no dementia, no cognitive problems. The answer is always the same. If you look at that same brain, there's no evidence for neuroinflammation. Somehow that lucky person had nerve cells dying in smaller amounts due to plaques and tangles, but it did not trigger the inflammatory response. So you didn't get the massive killing of nerve cells you need to get the disease. So in terms of how the Amylyx ALS drug works, is if you're thinking about neuroinflammation, I like to say in Alzheimer's, the plaques are like the match, the tangles are the brush fires that spread, you kill X number of nerve cells, but the neuroinflammation is the forest fire. And so there's two choices you have: put out the fire, or protect the trees, right? What this ALS drug does is it protects the nerve cells against neuroinflammation. And the neuroinflammation actually causes the nerve cells to lose energy. In other words, it's called oxidative stress. They literally get smothered. They can't breathe. The center of the cell that's you need for energy goes downhill, and now these nerve cells start to die. So what the drug combination for ALS did, the way we designed it, this was with two guys from Brown University who were undergraduates when they came to see me, believe it or not, where this idea started 7 years ago, is that you're protecting the nerve cell against that damage. And if you can do it in ALS, we hope, since the neuroinflammation is the same, just depends, the diseases are different based on how you get there. If we can protect against the neuroinflammation in Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, then maybe we'll have a drug that can help all these patients. We don't know yet. The Alzheimer's trial will be reading out this year. We're hopefully we're hoping this drug can get to ALS patients with approval soon. But I'm also working on other ways to stop the neuroinflammation, not just protect against it, put the fire out. And one of the ways you can do that is with the gut microbiome, by making those bacteria in the gut healthier. And we're actually trying to find exactly which bacteria among the trillions you have in your gut, thousands of species, which strains of bacteria are most protective, and then make a very customized probiotic with that. So these aren't the bacteria you read on your yogurt can. These are going to be bacteria that you never heard of, but live in your gut. And we're going to find the most protective ones that from the gut that can protect the brain from neuroinflammation. That's a very big project in the lab right now.
Deepak, expand on that. How's the microbiome, the inflammation in the gut connected to, for example, depression, which I didn't even realize depression was an inflammatory condition.
So 80% of the serotonin, anytime I make a mistake scientific, Rudy, correct me, but 80% of serotonin in your body comes from your gut. There's bidirectional traffic from the brain to the gut through the vagus nerve. So everything that's happening in your mind and brain is being transmitted to all the organs in your body. If you're stressed, then you have sympathetic overdrive. If you reset, recycle, rest, renew, that's vagal tone. Vagal tone is increased through chanting, through singing, through deep breathing, through yoga, asanas, through proper exercises. But now we also know that your food influences the microbiome instantly. And because there's bidirectional traffic, the food is very important in controlling your mood, which, of course, influences your attitude and your behavior and your responses to the world. So there is a movement right now to create something called nutritional psychiatry, because changing diet can change mood and stress responses and inflammation pretty instantly, other than all the other things I mentioned.
My goodness. Back to Rudy for a second. I was really clear on this. What percentage of people with depression have an inflammatory cause of their depression, do you think? I'm not talking about mild depression. I'm talking about severe feelings of blue, often requiring medications. Has anyone ever gotten numbers on that?
I don't know the numbers on that, but I know that there's a growing number of studies that show inflammation in the brain plays a major role in not just depression, but in schizophrenia and many different, in bipolar depression, many different neuropsych disorders, not just neurological disorders. And I want to make a point to Deepak's point. An experiment that we did with some others at the University of Chicago, we took Alzheimer's mice. These are mice that genetically programmed to have Alzheimer's disease, putting in the human Alzheimer's genes. And all we did was change their microbiome in their gut, and we were able to dramatically reduce plaques and neuroinflammation in the mouse brain. And we also, and if you do this when the mice are very young, this is really important. When the mice are first born, let's say you only adjust their microbiome for that first week or two, when they get old, they still get the benefit because that microbiome gets maintained. And now this gets a little gross, but after you fix the mice through the gut microbiome, your mice like to eat each other's feces. So if you take the feces of an Alzheimer's mouse and put it in the cage, and now the healthy mouse who is fixed eats the feces because they'll eat it, their microbiome goes back to the Alzheimer mouse microbiome, and they get the pathology again in the brain from the gut. So you can fix it and then make it. Yeah. And the other thing Deepak says, it's a two-way street. As the Alzheimer mouse gets older and there's more pathology in the brain, it actually makes the gut microbiome go off, and then you get this vicious cycle. So it's super connected.
All right, for the last 2 minutes, let's predict the future. Do you think someone who's diagnosed with Alzheimer's today could, because of the timing of the medications that are being in trials now, be able to be treated successfully so they don't develop clinical disease that's advanced? Or do you think that's going to happen in 5 years or 10 years?
I'm going to say 5 years, just because the drugs we need to stop the initiating pathology, the plaques and tangles, the match and the brush fires to get the inflammation going, we have those drugs in trials or already working. Except the reason why they're not on the market is that they're being used too late to make people better. So it's like if you have a heart attack and you say, here, just take some Lipitor. No, you had to take that 10 years ago. So now that we're learning, we need to start using these drugs to stop the initiating pathology 5, 10, 20 years before symptoms, early detection, early intervention. And that's all dovetailing right now. And you have drugs that are going to protect against the neuroinflammation already in trials. So I'm very optimistic.
All right, Deepak, 30 seconds. What is the healthiest thing you do that you recommend we try too?
Every day, I commit to 4 things: joyful, energetic body, loving, compassionate heart, clear mind, and lightness of being. And then I practice yoga, meditation, don't take myself seriously. And I follow a diet that is maximum diversity in plant-based foods, not manufactured, refined, processed, or having chemicals. Take care of my microbiome.
Rudy, I know you talk to Deepak all the time. Are you practicing what he's preaching?
Absolutely, yes. And we both lost weight over the pandemic. We're happy about that too.
It's been a blessing having you both visit with us. Thank you for all your wisdom. God bless you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mehmet.